It is funny how often we treat our own lives like we are sitting in a doctor's waiting room.
Oh, absolutely. Just
Uh,
sitting there flipping through old magazines.
Right. We have our goals, our dreams, these massive plans we want to achieve, but we just sit there waiting for some invisible receptionist to call our name and say, okay, the time is finally right. You can start now.
Yeah, and the harsh reality of that waiting room is that it is infinitely crowded and, well, nobody is ever going to call your name.
Exactly. Which is exactly the trap we are dismantling today for you, the learner. We are looking at a stack of incredibly insightful transcripts there from 2 videos exploring the law of action.
It is such a vital topic to dig into.
It really is. So, the mission for today's deep dive is to figure out how to completely short-circuit that destructive loop of waiting for the elusive right time. We are going to explore how action serves as the literal mechanism that pulls an abstract idea out of your head and, well, forces it into physical reality.
I love that framing.
Okay, let's unpack this, because usually when we talk about universal laws, the conversation can immediately drift into this very abstract, almost untethered territory.
It really can, yeah. Which is why we need to ground it immediately. My goal today is to examine not just the surface level of what this concept is, but to really dig into why it forms the psychological, historical, and honestly, the biological foundation of human progress.
Which is a huge claim.
Right. Because once we strip away the abstraction and look at the underlying mechanics, it stops being a philosophical concept and becomes a highly tactical tool, a tool that you can actually apply to your procrastination habits this very afternoon.
Okay, let's start with the framework then. The material positions the law of action as part of the 12 universal laws.
Yes, exactly.
And most of us are at least somewhat familiar with things like the law of vibration or the law of attraction, right? This idea of setting underlying frequencies and intentions.
Sure, those definitely get a lot of mainstream attention.
Right, but the texts explicitly highlight the law of action as the most tangible of the 12.
Yeah.
It is the catalyst. It is the engine that actually puts the other 11 into practice.
Right, because without it, intention is really just a hallucination. The analysis describes it as the physical bridge from desire to achievement.
A physical bridge, I like that.
And what's fascinating here is how this isn't just a modern self-help trope, If you examine the historical context provided in the sources, you see this exact imperative anchored deeply in ancient spiritual traditions.
Long before modern psychology was even a thing.
Exactly, long before we had the clinical terms to define it.
Yeah, the documentation points specifically to Buddhism and Hinduism, actually.
Yes, so in Buddhism, you have the Eightfold Path, and a massive non-negotiable pillar of that path is right action.
Right action. Meaning what exactly in this context?
Well, the underlying philosophy is that you cannot simply meditate your way into enlightenment while your physical movements in the real world completely contradict that state of mind. Your physical behaviors must perfectly mirror your spiritual intentions.
Ah, so it has to align.
Right. And similarly, in Hinduism, the concept of karma is fundamentally a law of action. We often misuse the word karma today to mean a sort of cosmic revenge, but its truest definition dictates that our actions have direct compounding consequences.
So it is not passive at all.
Not at all. It demands an active, deliberate shaping of your destiny rather than just a passive surrender to whatever circumstances you are handed.
It's the same thread running through the New Thought movement too, right? The idea that we are active co-creators of our reality.
Yes, exactly. It places the responsibility entirely on our shoulders.
Rather than expecting the universe to act like a cosmic vending machine.
Cosmic vending machine, exactly. I love that.
But what really caught my eye is that we don't just stay in the metaphysical realm here. The transcripts boldly connect this spiritual concept to some of the heaviest hitters in the history of science. I am talking Isaac Newton, Albert Einstein, and Charles Darwin.
And this is where the synthesis gets truly brilliant, in my opinion, because it proves that action isn't just a spiritual requirement, it is a physical and biological absolute.
Okay, break that down for us. Start with Newton.
Sure. Take Newton's third law of motion. To every action, there is always opposed and equal reaction. The texts apply this directly to the inertia of human existence.
Right, because we all learn in grade school that an object at rest stays at rest, but we rarely, if ever, apply that to our own behavior.
We really don't.
Like if you are sitting on the couch scrolling on your phone, your life essentially stays on the couch.
Exactly. And there is a deep neurological reason for that, actually. Your brain is a highly efficient, calorie-conserving machine.
It wants to be lazy.
In a way, yes. It views the initiation of any new challenging task as an expensive expenditure of metabolic energy, so it actively resists change.
That makes so much sense.
That neurological inertia is very real. You have to apply a disproportionate amount of physical force and action to break that biological resting state.
Okay. And then we bring in Einstein, who obviously reshaped our entire understanding of relativity. The material includes this fantastic quote from him. Let me find it here. Life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving.
It is such a great quote.
It is. But how does relativity or the physics of time actually connect to human procrastination? I mean, practically speaking.
Well, think about the interplay between action and time. When you procrastinate, time dilates in a psychological sense. The longer you put off a task, the heavier the dread becomes.
Oh, absolutely. The mountain just looks taller and taller.
Exactly. And the more daunting the obstacle appears. Einstein understood that forward momentum is the only way to maintain equilibrium in a universe that is constantly expanding and changing. Movement prevents collapse.
Wow. Okay, and then Darwin rounds out the trio with the theory of evolution.
Right.
The text points out that survival isn't about being the absolute strongest or even the most intelligent. It is about taking action to adapt.
Precisely. The species that survive are the ones that dynamically interact with a shifting environment.
They don't just wait around.
No, they're the ones who don't wait for the environment to become comfortable again.
They
Improvise, they move, and they act.
So putting this all together into a modern context, is the law of action basically like having a state-of-the-art GPS system in your car?
Okay, I'm following.
Like the other universal laws, your intentions, your positive mindset, they essentially program the destination, right? They calculate the most efficient route.
Right.
But the car is fundamentally useless until you actually press the gas pedal.
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it. I mean, whether you are looking at an ancient text defining karma or a physics textbook defining inertia, they both arrive at the exact same undeniable conclusion. That existence requires movement. A calculated route means absolutely nothing without acceleration.
Okay, I get the GPS analogy, but practically speaking, when I am staring at my laptop at 8 in the morning, the inertia feels less like abstract physics and more like, well, paralyzing anxiety.
Oh, I think everyone listening can relate to that.
Right. If science, history, and philosophy all universally agree that action is this absolute requirement, why do we fail at it so consistently? I mean, people genuinely want to achieve their goals. We don't want to be stuck.
And that brings us to the most crucial pivot in the source material. The conversation has to shift from the mere requirement of action to the quality and alignment of that action.
The quality of the action.
Yes. The distinction here is razor sharp. The law of action is not about just working hard or being busy for the sake of feeling productive.
Oh, man. Here's where it gets really interesting, because I see this modern trap constantly, and honestly, I fall into it myself all the
It's
time.
incredibly common.
It is remarkably easy to just act busy. You can sit at your desk, aggressively answer emails for 8 hours, color code your spreadsheet, and by 5 p.m. you feel completely drained and technically productive.
Technically, yes.
But you haven't actually moved an inch toward your real overarching goals. So how do we actively distinguish between that comfortable busy work and the kind of action that actually drives progress?
Modern psychology defines this as the difference between reactive behavior and intentional, purposeful action.
Okay, reactive versus intentional.
Right. When you are just clearing your inbox, you are playing defense. You are reacting to external demands to satisfy a short-term dopamine craving.
Because it feels good to check a box.
Exactly. It feels safe because the stakes are incredibly low. But for action to actually alter your reality, there must be absolute alignment between your internal thoughts, your foundational beliefs, and your physical movements.
But wait, if I am terrified of taking a massive risk, say, finally launching a business, or initiating a really difficult conversation to save a relationship, how do I get my beliefs to align with the action I need to take?
That is the hard part.
Because right now, my belief is just, well, this is dangerous and I'm going to fail.
And that fear is exactly why we default to the busy work. We use trivial tasks to shield ourselves from the vulnerability of taking what the literature calls inspired action.
Inspired action.
Yes. Inspired action is driven by your intuition and core values, rather than societal norms or obligation. But as you pointed out, inspired action almost always requires stepping out of your comfort zone.
Which freaks the brain out.
Entirely. It triggers the brain's fear centers immediately.
So how do we bypass that fear? Because it feels so loud.
The material emphasizes that this is where rigorous inner work is non-negotiable. You cannot just force aligned action through sheer willpower if your internal psychological landscape is littered with negative self-talk.
The texts mention practices like mindfulness, meditation, and journaling. But frankly, those terms get thrown around so much, they almost sound like generic self-care platitudes at this point.
They do sound like buzzwords, I agree.
Right. So how are we actually supposed to use them here in a practical way?
You have to view them not as relaxation techniques, but as diagnostic tools. Think of it as a cognitive audit.
A cognitive audit. I like that.
When you journal in this context, you aren't just writing about your day, you are actively mapping out your negative thought patterns.
So it is highly targeted.
Very. You might use a framework like fear setting, where you explicitly write down the absolute worst case scenario of taking that risk.
Just staring the fear right in the face.
Precisely. By forcing those vague, paralyzing anxieties onto paper, you often realize your amygdala is wildly overreacting to a perceived threat. You have to make the unconscious sabotage conscious before you can dismantle it.
That makes a lot of sense. The journaling exposes the faulty wiring so you can actually fix the machine.
Exactly. Because if you act solely out of obligation or unexamined fear, it leads directly to burnout.
And nobody wants that.
Right. But when you take inspired action, even when it involves significant risk, it is usually accompanied by a deep sense of fulfillment. It aligns with your internal compass, which provides the sustainable energy required for long-term success.
Yeah. Okay, so we have established the foundation. We need purposeful, inspired action, not frantic busy work. And we have to audit our internal beliefs so we aren't unconsciously hitting the brakes while pressing the gas pedal.
Perfect summary.
But let's get incredibly practical now. You, the listener, are sitting there right now. You know exactly what you need to do. You have audited your fears. Your goals are clear, but what you are still hesitating.
You are staring at the blank screen.
Exactly. You are staring at the blank screen. What is the actual toolkit for materializing action in the real world today?
The material outlines a highly specific, tactical toolkit. And it begins with a technique specifically designed to conquer that exact micro-moment of hesitation you just described.
Okay, what is it?
It was popularized by author Melanie Robbins, and it is known as the 5-second rule.
Oh, I am familiar with this, but I have to push back a little here.
Okay, go for it.
The rule is basically that when you have an impulse to act on a goal, you just count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and physically move.
That is the gist of it, yes.
Honestly, counting backwards sounds incredibly reductive. Does modern neuroscience actually support the idea that just counting from 5 to 1 can cure chronic procrastination?
I know it sounds deceptively simple, but the neurological mechanism behind it is actually fascinating.
Really? How so?
Well, when you feel that hesitation, your brain's default mode network is taking over. The amygdala recognizes the discomfort of the impending task and immediately floods your system with excuses to protect your energy.
Right, the whole calorie saving thing again.
Exactly. By counting backward, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, you are engaging in a task that requires focus. This disrupts the default thought pattern and physically draws blood flow away from the amygdala and into the prefrontal cortex.
Oh, wow. The prefrontal cortex being the part of the brain responsible for logical decision-making and deliberate action.
Precisely. You are essentially waking up the executive center of your brain just long enough to initiate physical movement before the emotional center can paralyze you with self-doubt.
So it sounds like a manual override switch for the human brain.
That is exactly what it is.
You are literally short-circuiting the procrastination algorithm before it has the processing time to fully boot up.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. You are manually overriding the brain's evolutionary desire to conserve energy. The literature notes that while it requires a burst of willpower initially, repeating this override eventually builds a new neural pathway.
Neuroplasticity.
Yes, transforming decisive action into an automatic habit over time.
Okay, so the 5-second rule is the spark plug. It initiates the engine. But, a spark isn't going to drive the car across the country. What comes next in the toolkit?
The immediate next step is clarity of purpose. The 5-second rule is completely useless if you don't know where you are going. You will just sprint in the wrong direction.
Which is exhausting and counterproductive.
Very. Action must be directed. The texts strongly advise against vague aspirations. You must define your goals with surgical precision, write them down, and reverse engineer them into a roadmap of microsteps.
Right, because if your goal is, say, write a book, The 5-second rule won't help you at all. It's just too massive.
Way too massive.
But if your goal is open a laptop and write one single paragraph, well, you can count down from 5 and execute that immediately.
Exactly. Which feeds perfectly into the next crucial component the transcripts highlight, which is consistent effort.
Consistency.
Consistency is the absolute cornerstone here. The material emphasizes that monumental achievements are rarely the result of one massive heroic leap.
They never are.
They are the result of daily, incremental actions compounding over time. It is the steady accumulation of momentum that eventually becomes an unstoppable force.
And as you are building that momentum, the transcripts stress the importance of celebrating success, but they use a very specific analogy that I found really interesting.
Oh, the garden analogy.
Yes, they compare celebrating small wins to planting a seed in a garden. The more you celebrate, the greater the future harvest. But what is actually happening there mechanically? Why does celebration matter so much?
Well, the text uses a somewhat traditional agrarian metaphor of planting seeds. Neurologically, what you are doing is engineering a dopamine loop.
And a dopamine loop, okay?
When you achieve a micro goal and actively take a moment to celebrate it, your brain releases dopamine. And dopamine is not just the pleasure chemical, it is the molecule of motivation.
Oh, I see. It's like reaching a save point in a very difficult video game.
Yes.
It gives you the psychological relief and the motivation to tackle the next harder level because you feel that tangible progress.
Exactly. You are chemically reinforcing the behavior, ensuring that your brain will literally crave that same action tomorrow.
That is so powerful. Now, we have talked a lot about goals and productivity, but I want to make sure we broaden the scope here.
Good idea.
Because it is so easy to view this entirely through the lens of career advancement or financial wealth. Does the material limit the law of action to just material success?
Not at all. In fact, they emphasize the massive scale of action across all dimensions of life. This principle applies just as rigidly to your personal relationships, your physical health, and your emotional growth.
That makes sense.
Action is what bridges the gap between wanting a healthier body and actually transforming your fitness. Action is what bridges the gap between wishing you had a deeper connection with your partner and actually initiating the vulnerable conversations required to build it.
And it scales far beyond the individual, too, all the way up to a macro-societal level. The documentation provides a very profound historical example of this.
They do. To examine the ultimate scale of this law, the texts look at the monumental transformations driven by collective action.
Specifically pointing to Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. And just to impartially report on the context provided by the sources here, they detail how his strategic use of peaceful protests, public speeches, and organized nonviolent resistance to fight racial injustice mobilized millions of people.
It was incredible.
It wasn't just a shift in ideology, right? It was a sustained campaign of physical action that ultimately culminated in transformative civil rights legislation. The text uses this historical record to demonstrate a profound reality.
Which is that action does not merely alter the trajectory of a single human life.
Yeah.
Collective action has the power to dismantle and rebuild entire social and political landscapes.
Which perfectly sets up a quote from Mahatma Gandhi that is featured prominently in the text. You must be the change you wish to see in the world.
Notice the phrasing there.
Yeah.
It doesn't say you must think about the change or hope for the change. You must be it. You have to embody it through your actions, becoming the physical catalyst for change in your own life and the world around you.
It entirely reframes the level of power we hold in our seemingly mundane, everyday choices.
This raises an important question, actually, and it is a direct challenge that the material issues to the audience.
What is it?
How much of your current existence is being lived passively versus actively? The transcripts phrase it beautifully. You are not a passive spectator in the theater of life. You are the actor on the stage, and action is your script.
I absolutely love that framing. You are the actor on the stage. So what does this all mean for you listening right now? Let's distill the core insights.
Let's do it.
We have established that bridging that massive, intimidating gap between the life you dream about and the reality you inhabit requires overcoming profound biological and physical inertia.
You have to get out of the waiting room.
You must align your internal beliefs using tools like cognitive auditing to expose your hidden fears so that you aren't just spinning your wheels with comfortable busy work.
Right. Instead, taking bold, inspired action.
Exactly. And you execute this by using real-world mechanics, deploying the 5-second manual override to disrupt your brain's fear response,
Yeah.
mapping out a crystal clear roadmap of microsteps, relying on the compounding power of daily consistency, and leveraging dopamine by celebrating every single win.
The power to fundamentally alter your reality is entirely within your grasp, but you have to actively seize it.
Absolutely.
And to leave you with a final thought, we noted earlier that Einstein recognized how our actions interact with time, believing that our present movements resonate throughout the past and the future.
Right.
Well, if that is true, and if this law universally applies to every single facet of human existence, what small 5-second decision could you make today that might completely rewrite the trajectory of a struggling relationship, or breathe life into a personal ambition you had previously assumed was forever stuck in place?
Now there's a thought to carry with you into the rest of your day. The next time you feel that familiar, paralyzing weight of hesitation creeping in, just remember the override. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, jump. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep moving, keep questioning the world around you, and we will catch you next time.